Back in 2019, Google achieved quantum supremacy. It was a landmark moment in the history of quantum computing. Today's conversation is with the person who led that effort, Dr. John Martinis. We're going to talk about what it takes to build a world-class quantum team, um, why different quantum computers have their own strengths, and what's next for John as he continues shaping the future of the field. All right. So, first question. So you led Google's team when they achieved quantum supremacy back in 2019. What would you say is the most important breakthrough from that effort, like the thing that was required to make that breakthrough happen?
Well, the reason it was important, it's kind of a funny story, is that when we went to Google and we were proposing to build a quantum computer, there was actually some pushback from some of the executives, kind of like, well, we build these big data centers. How can you possibly think that a little physics experiment is going to do, better than, our huge computing resources, which Google and other companies have now? And it was very nice to do this experiment to show that, at least for a mathematical problem, that you could actually build something, something. And it was really just taking it out of the academic lab and, bringing it into an industrial setting and scaling it up and doing things that was key to figuring that out. And I would say, when I was at UCSB, I had the vision that we could do this. We could build a big quantum computer, and it was a nice invention by the theory team and, others around the world that, found this, random circuit sampling, algorithm that allowed you to show this, with a modest number of qubits. Now, it was hard because you had to get the qubits to work well and you get everything to work well. And at the time when we were proposing this, people thought it would take forever to do this. But I had known from UCSB and whatever that things are working really well, and that it would be possible to put this together with a good team effort, a lot of good ideas, and that's what happened.
Makes sense. So since then, you've partly worked on scaling these superconducting qubit compute quantum computers. Um, how have those lessons kind of influenced the today's roadmaps? Like, for example, I think you've mentioned fidelity before. That was a big part of scaling.
Yeah, so you have to make the qubits better, and people are doing that on all the qubits. And I think we can do better and make it more reliable. But you also have to scale them up. And although the present methods, what we did at Google, what IBM are doing, Rigetti, IQM, other people are doing, nice things, are scaling it up. They're at 50 or 100 qubits right now. Okay. And uh, we're trying to reach 1 million qubits. Now, what was funny is, by the quantum supremacy experiment, we were at 50 qubits, and we were saying, and other people copied, we get to 1 million qubits by the end of the decade. Okay, so it's been half the decade, and we went from 50 to 100. Okay, this is not good news. Okay,
Yeah.
and no surprise, it's harder than we think, and whatever. When I was at Google and I kind of proposed that we would do this, I knew that, you know, I knew we just had to propose something and move forward, but we needed some better ideas. But Google wanted to do their own thing. They changed the management, whatever. So by leaving Google, I was able to kind of think about it in an independent way and really think about what's going on, and especially working with Alan Ho and also Robert, the co-founders. We came up with enough ideas to really have a different way that what we think is going to scale up rapidly. And basically, you have to use, put it very simply, you have to use this superpower of the semiconductor manufacturing industry to scale it up properly. Right now, it's really a pretty academic process. Although people are spending a lot of money on it, you really have, we think, have to do it a new way in order to do that. So we're talking about wafer scale integration, baking qubits chips about this big, about 20,000 qubits, tiling them together. Right now people are talking about tiling together 100 qubit devices. To go to millions, I mean, this is not what you want to do. At least at 20,000, you could imagine doing that. And then, of course, to yield 20,000, you have to use better processes. So it was just a whole different way to think about it, which we think is the future. Okay, if we really want to do this right. But okay, other people are doing other things. I get it. But
Yeah. Sorry, go
that's
ahead.
our idea here.
Yeah, I've noticed that like Zurich instruments, the kickboard, quantum machines, they'll have like these boxes to help you accelerate, they sit between the PC and your fridge and your quantum computer, all that stuff. And they'll have like 20 coax cables coming out the front. And you mentioned, how do you get that to a million? Like, I mean, I guess there's a little bit of multiplexing with frequencies, but
Yeah, you do some multiplexing. First of all, coax is a really inefficient way to, to wire. In fact, there was a little I was proposing doing Flex, and someone else at Google wanted to do coax. And for my last year there was this really uncomfortable situation where people just couldn't understand that you had to do Flex. I mean, you have to get rid of this coax. So yeah, people are doing it now. That was just way ahead of its time. People weren't thinking about much, but that's fine. So you have to get rid of Flex. And then I would say you have to wafer scale integrate. You have to integrate some of the control down at 3 Kelvin. There was a way to get rid of these large circulators and tupas that are this big for, 10 qubits. So, Robert McDermott had that idea. That was key. And then, we're going to have cold CMOS and do a bunch of things to make it scalable. But, the thing is, right now, people are stuck into doing it a certain way. And for me, they're in a box canyon. They can keep improving that, but they're never going to scale up hugely. You have to just do something totally new. And, as a startup company, that's our job is to do something totally new and, to look ahead. Now, it's hard to do all this stuff so that we can't compete against, 100 qubit devices people are making. But we're going to make it in a way so that once we make a few qubits and test them outright, then we'll be able to scale rapidly. At least that's the theory. But of
you,
course,
you've
there's
talked.
lots of things you have to do. This is not easy.
You've previously mentioned that I think you call this the idea of integrating horizontally instead of integrating vertically.
Right.
How do you get like large companies to work with you? I've noticed that from my point of view, when I'm writing government grants, my chances of hitting the government grant lottery go through the roof if I can get a big company to work with me on a thing. But how do like you have any advice for getting big companies to work with you?
So, yeah, let me just make a statement that, this is a business plan, a business strategy. And I'm going to say that, Google and IBM and I'm Rigetti, and, all these bunch of companies, they want to do everything themselves. Now, this is a much simpler strategy. You don't have to sign IP agreements. You do it all yourself. So this is simpler. And, I can understand why what you would want to do it that way. As a small company, you can't do that. And also, I think you're not taking advantage of this. But the real problem comes into IP. So, first of all, you have to decide who's going to share the profit, okay, which, there's no profit now. So you don't worry about it too much. But, there's not the big profit, but you have to think about the business strategy. But the real problem is intellectual property. So, for
Right.
example, I signed an agreement with someone, an academic person, and then to do some things, and then the lawyers from that academic institution started calling me up and saying things that somehow we co-invented something when I invented it in the first place, and I just had to drop the collaboration because I just can't deal with it. So the problem, the reason this is difficult is that when the lawyers get involved, they can make your life really difficult for all sides. And, people, business, certainly they think they can build it all themselves. They don't want to get involved with that. And, certainly there's all these issues there. Now, we collaborate with academic institutions and we have some way to deal with that. But it's a really tricky business, and you have to do things right, and you have to do it so that there's a clear delineation between property and who owns what and whatever. It can be a big problem. We spend a lot of time trying to navigate this, but we think it's
So
the right model. And I think just people have to be reasonable. Okay.
yeah,
And a lot of times you get some lawyers involved in the negotiations, and then it just takes forever. And they're trying to make their mark, and it's like, well, yeah, okay, you make your mark, but it can blow up the collaboration. And so everyone has to be reasonable and negotiate in good faith. I'm just saying it's hard. I don't have I would say Alan Ho, the CEO, he's very good at this. I try to stay out of it, but I understand that it's tricky.
makes sense. So that's a lot of good advice for once you're in the collaboration. But it sounds like Alan Hose is really the key for getting into the collaborations.
Yeah, he's very good at generating uh, partnerships and figuring out what's in it for everyone involved. But it's really beneficial for us because we have access to technology that we would not be able to do, and I would say even large companies can't do necessarily. The deep expertise that you have available to you this way is fantastic, and I think that's what you're going to need. And I'm going to say, I think the physicists and scientists who are running these programs are, let's say, a bit naive about how hard it is to get all this to work and to manufacture it efficiently and the like. You might be used to, buying computers for data centers, but that's totally different than, running a research project to generate the processes and the manufacturing in the first place. And just using a clean room is not the same as using a modern 300 millimeter tool set. These are they're different universes. Okay, it's totally different.
Makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. So at my job, we basically borrow the machines over at U Chicago, the university, so that we don't have to like own them ourselves, and it makes things a lot easier for us. Another thing is that we have been you're talking about how trying to be reasonable with other companies. Yeah, like they've tried to, some of our larger collaborators have tried to push us around, and we basically had to give them an ultimatum, like either we share things or we're leaving, and we managed to win that that, but I mean it was close. Yeah,
Yeah, and I don't have an answer for that. It's just that people have to be reasonable about this, and to work together, you have to share. And a lot of companies don't like to share, or the lawyers don't want the complication because you get more in trouble if something goes wrong, and then you were part of it, so that looks good. Whereas to form a good collaboration, well, that's nice, but you don't necessarily get, promoted or you benefit from it either way. I mean, I'm not sure that the whole, situation works well. So,
makes
and I
sense.
would say, for us, what we've decided is, we don't have to garnish all of the profit of a quantum computer. We can share that, and that's fine. I think it's more important. I think we're going to make more money as a business if we share information and we actually build it, because this thing is hard to build. We actually build it, and then we're very successful, and then we share everything. Okay.
Would you say that's also just a like a good advice for kind of communicating about quantum technologies and possibly getting people on board to like join you, for example, for your academic days or your Google days? Like, how did you, I guess, build these groups and yeah, convince people that your idea was worth pursuing?
Well, obviously, I was a gigantic failure in the corporate experience because even though I was very successfully led the hardware to do the quantum supremacy experiment, I couldn't get promoted and I got demoted to chief scientist where I had no authority over the group. And, I did things wrong and, whatever, but I just didn't fit into a corporate environment, put it that way. So I am not the person, to give you, recommendations for a corporate environment. But what I would say is forming our own company and forming it with our co-founders, how we think alike, how we have to think how to do things. We've been able to set our company culture and set it so that we think, although we don't have the money that the corporations have, we can be much more efficient. And I'm going to say the one most important thing in this field is that truth matters. Okay. There's
Okay.
so much hype in this field. And, I
Oh,
understand why there is. And, we think it's really interesting too. If you start believing all your hype so that you're not working on the hard physics problems and solving them, you're going to get stuck in a back box canyon. You're going to not fix things for a long time. And, it's really important. So when I went to the IEEE conference and I was in the panel, I talked a lot about, and in my talk, it was, what are the performance metrics to build these communication systems? And, you need to talk about that and you need to discuss it and talk about, like if you have a communication system specification, what's the overhead for that? Because it could be the overhead for communication is larger than your quantum computer itself, for example. So you just have to, even though, that might not, help you short term and, it might be against the hype. We think that we have to be very honest about, what you need to do and what you need to fix.
so do you have an example, or I guess a better way to ask that question is, what would you say is the most underrated bottleneck in building a million qubit machine? Fabrication, like control electronics, algorithms.
It's everything. Everything has to get better. And, I would say it's the system engineering where everything, for example, and I say this often, when people talk about their quantum system, they talk about their unique good quality of their system. And each system has its own unique good things. However, when you build a system, what limits you are the bad qualities, not the good ones. Of course, it's always both, but it's the bad ones that really, hinder you. And no one talks about that. Okay. And that's again, when I give a talk and I try to talk about the field, I try to talk the pros and cons of all the different approaches. And there, and people have to work on figuring that out. So, for me, for superconducting qubits, we have to make the qubits better. We have to make it in a way that's scalable. And the ultimate system metric is we have to bring the cost down. Okay. And, right now, if you were to brute force something to a million qubits or so, superconducting qubits, this is could be in the tens of billions of dollars. And we think by doing this properly, you can bring that down to it's hundreds of millions of dollars, which is the cost of a supercomputer. So people know how to budget for that. Okay. So, and if you aren't talking about cost, I mean, which scientist does? Okay. No one talks about this. So you really have to talk about cost as part of the driver for your technology and figure out how to lower the cost over time. But a lot of these basic ideas, it's going to be really hard to lower the cost. Whereas what we're trying to do is use integrated circuit technology for everything, or circuit boards, technology, and you can drive the cost of that really low.
So those are some of the, I guess, well, the big problem, the challenges of superconducting quantum computers. What would you say are the challenges with the other ones? Photonics, ion, neutral superconducting, NMR. If you feel like talking about
Okay,
any of those.
I'll just go. So, what I'm going to do is, according to what I just said, I would say, what are the problems that need to get fixed?
Sure.
Okay. So, you take neutral atoms and you take ion traps, valued a lot right now. But what's the speed of those? And the most interesting way to operate these is where you're moving the ions or you're moving the atoms around. Now, when you do that, that takes about 100 microseconds. And if you compare that to the, superconducting qubits, for example, which is about 50 nanoseconds, that's 2,000 times slower. And then, if you do things in parallel, you're okay. But a lot of times you have to do things in sequential. And then it can be even slower, maybe 10,000, maybe 100,000. I don't know. Depends on the architecture. So for those systems, one of the big issue is speed. And if you take something and you make it twice as slow, yeah, it's still usable, even electronics. But if you make something thousands of times slower, that's not good. Now you can get around that by making it thousands of times bigger, but then you're going from millions of qubits to billions of qubits. And so how are you going to do that economically? So again, it's a system thing. But that's the real issue in my mind, and people are working on it. But you know, again, you have to think about all the metrics. Now, for example, photonics has a really nice way to scale up and operate things at 4 Kelvin and the like. But what's really hard in photonics is to have single component quality that's good. And at some point, let's say you have to measure the photons very efficiently, or you have to do something efficiently. And it's very easy to get photon loss in a variety of mechanisms with couplers, with the detectors, and whatever. And, it's very hard to get couplers with better than 99% fidelity or detectors with better than 99. So they have this great plan for scaling up, but, can you get the component quality good enough?
Yeah, I remember. I think it was PsiQuantum that was talking about photonic quantum computers, and they were saying that in order to like get photons into their system, they had to have like four different photon emitters like going parallel, and then just like whichever one actually fires is the one that they then plug into the rest of the
Yeah,
quantum
but
machine.
that's one that gets rid of one issue. But if you want to know which one fired, you have to have a detector, and those detectors have to be good too. Okay, so you have to think about the whole system. And I don't know the details to know how things are working, but the problem photonics are great because they can go a long distance, let's say in a fiber cable. However, you have to connect it to chips and you have to detect things, and those things tend to have problems.
That makes
Now, the
sense. Yeah.
nice thing about photonics is, let's say quantum computer doesn't work out. All the technology they're building is quite interesting for general photonics industry, like in doing things more efficiently and the like. So there's real value being created there for photonic integration. So that's really cool. Okay, and that's like, but for quantum computing, but this topic is there, but not talked about very often. But that's a critical thing.
Yeah. So those are some of the like challenges, some of the risks. What would you say are the rewards, or a better question is, what would you say is the where will quantum computers first be useful for I mean, obviously they're useful now, but like, break even
Yeah,
money
well,
wise
yeah,
or yeah.
and that's right, and that's okay. So in our consortium, there's a whole theory group that have been working very hard on this. Okay, and then for this government proposal where people are really asking that question, people are really working hard on it. And I would say that there are some nice, compelling things to do. Let's say with simulation. where if you can solve, Fermi-Hubbard model, which basically says how electrons interact. So you want to talk, how does the real world work? And you want to simulate the real world in various ways. Then the quantum computer can do much, much better than a classical computer in that. But you have to build a big system, but you can do that. There might be some other applications, I'm not the best person to answer this, but I always like kind of the quantum simulation because there's a supercomputer use case for that right now. People are spending a significant amount of time on supercomputers to do that. And certainly quantum computers, if that could be when that's mapped properly, can do that. And people have good estimates of that now, what you have to build. It's a definite application. So I kind of like that. I like having a definite idea of what you have to do and build, but I expect those estimates get better over time and people to find other things that they can do too.
Yeah. Um, Kind of a random question. Do you travel a lot? I remember seeing you have a Rick Steves backpack. I'm also a huge fan of Rick Steves, but I wasn't sure.
I just like carrying a small bag so that I don't want to wait at the baggage claim, and I have a
Yeah.
bad back, so I just can't carry that much weight. So that's kind of a nice. It's almost like a day pack, but it's a little bit bigger. So I do that. But I used to travel a lot more, but I'm still traveling, once or twice a month now. And but mostly I work from home because I'm doing design work and other things. And try to get to Wisconsin once a month. And we have lots of Zoom, Google Meet, whatever meetings to make sure everyone's in sync. But yeah, so I'm going up to the Bay Area in a week for a conference on cryoelectronics, which I'm really looking forward to, and learn about that because that's very important to our field. So I get to learn about a whole new field.
Are you are you going to spend the time to like visit the tourist attractions in the Bay Area, or are you more about like conserving your energy for the business side of things and maybe learning?
Try to do both. I've been
Yeah.
up there in the last 6 months for some scientific meetings, for some meetings with applied materials and a little mini conference there. Now this other thing. So yeah, it turns out that it's easy for me to drive up to the Bay Area, and it's a nice drive. The freeway going up there is nice. So, I usually just drive up,
Yeah. Nice.
listen to
So
the
let,
radio for 4 hours.
what kind of do you use music or NPR or
Oh, it's usually music from my generation, which I call geriatric rock at this point.
Nice. So I guess besides geriatric rock and your startup collab, what are you excited about these days?
Well, I'm actually retired as from the professor, which I like teaching and like do, but I basically get to, give conferences and give talks like this. So I still get to do a lot of things like that, but I'm just really fascinated with a startup company and trying to run that, learning the business part of that. I don't have to take charge of it, but I'm learning about it. And then also, I'm actually building a lot of electronics for this to be able to do noise measurements and noise cancellation of our devices and understanding various things about the experiment. So I'm kind of enjoying doing that kind of lab work, electronics design and prototyping. And then, of course, working with, the quantum and also working with a big team. But the nice thing is once you get to retirement age, you kind of can just decide, I'm going to do what I want. Okay.
Yeah,
And focus on that. And,
yeah.
obviously we have a business and we have to do things there, but, I think what I want to do and what is going to be profitable for a business, I think is aligned in my mind, at least in our business plan. So yeah, I get to do exactly what I want to do.
Makes
So
sense. Yeah, that sounds
try to
fun.
keep going with this as long as I can.
I have a 1 qubit project I've been working on. I have a couple of YouTube videos about it. I'll send them to you because I think they're very like hands-on electronics related, and so I think it might be up your alley. So I'll send them to you email.
Good. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I enjoy that. And yeah, we're trying to make sure that we really understand how to bring up 1 qubit really well, but do it in a way that's upward compatible for, millions of qubits and really understand the physics. And yeah, we were very pleased at the IEEE meeting that the Israeli Quantum Computing Center and Quantum Machines had a demo of one of our qubits. And, in 5 minutes, people were getting, 0.04% errors.
Oh
Okay.
yeah,
No
the
errors. One
fidelity
qubit. One
the
qubit.
fidelity sorry, yeah, the fidelity contest. That was you guys.
Yeah, that
Oh,
was that
cool.
was our and what was great is they worked very hard at Wisconsin to make the good qubits, get the electronics, get everything set up, and then just copied it and put it in there. And they were, very quickly able to get that to work. And the nice thing is that was done without using this drag thing. And if you use drag, you get about a factor of two better or so. But that was really nice to see that it was kind of practically useful. But there's still a lot of things we have to improve upon here, and we're working on getting 2 qubit devices and in solving things really well. So as an example, when you want to do step response for controlling your 2 qubit gates, make frequency tunable qubits and couplers, you have to calibrate your step response really well. And, we can do that pretty efficiently with part in 10 to the 4, or a few parts in 10 to the 4 accuracy on that. So that's really good. And that's what we need. So we've been doing a lot of things that are useful. And,
Yeah.
you just have to build up that expertise. And I think might be better than what we did at UCSB and Google, at least when I was there. They probably improved upon it since then. But there's a lot of things we've discovered new about how to do these things right.
Yeah, because like you were saying at one point that if you're going to a million qubits, that you got to make sure that the fidelity of those million is as high as it can be, because otherwise, yeah,
Yeah.
you get
Yeah.
an
And you
error
have
per
to
operation.
understand, yeah, what goes on. And, clearly the big companies are doing that too, but we have to do it with a variety of improvements. And I would say the electronics is actually, yeah, I actually made a lot of mistakes, okay, in the past, which we're now fixing. I'm surprised. They're very subtle mistakes, but you really have to do things better. And what happens is as you start to scale up, then there are more and more channels for things to go wrong. So if you don't understand exactly what's going on, you're going to have new challenges, and you're going to have to fix that. So we've already been seeing that and understanding what to do.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've been a bit over time. Thanks for humoring me and taking the time to talk to us. And I'll send you those videos and hope you like
Okay,
them. All right. Thank
great.
you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. It was a nice chat. Bye bye.